The discovery at Bering Strait. August 15, 2019, Providenia Bay, Russian Far East. The alarm clock's metallic rattle cut through the darkness at 3:47 a.m. Dmitry Volkov's calloused hand slapped it silent before the second ring. 37 years of fishing the Bering Sea had programmed his body to wake before dawn, when the water was calmest and the fish most vulnerable. He dressed in the dark, thermal underwear, wool socks darned twice over, canvas work pants stained with fish blood and diesel fuel. From the kitchen came the smell of strong black tea that his wife Katia had prepared the night before in a thermos. She knew better than to wake for these pre-dawn departures. After 4 decades of marriage, some routines required no words. Outside, Providenia was a collection of shadows, Soviet-era apartment blocks, their concrete facades crumbling from decades of salt spray and brutal winters. The town clung to the edge of the Chukotka Peninsula like a barnacle, home to fewer than 2,000 souls stubborn or desperate enough to make a living this far from civilization. The nearest city of any size was Anada, and that required either a treacherous boat journey or a flight on one of the aging Soviet helicopters that still serviced the region. Dmitry's nephew Alexei was already at the dock, preparing the Nadezhda, Hope, a 12-meter fishing vessel that Dmitry's father had bought in 1983. The boat had been old then. Now it was practically an antique, held together by welds, prayers, and an intimate knowledge of which engine sounds meant trouble and which were merely the complaints of an aging machine. "Privet, uncle," Alexei called out, his breath visible in the cold air. At 24, he still had the enthusiasm of youth, still believed the sea might make him rich rather than merely allowing him to survive. Weather report says clear skies until noon, then possible fog rolling in from the strait. "Then we fish until noon," Dmitry replied, stepping aboard with the ease of long practice. "Did you check the hydraulics on the net winch?" "Yesterday. Greased and ready." They cast off as the first grey light touched the eastern horizon. The Nadezhda's diesel engine coughed, sputtered, then settled into its familiar rumble. Dmitry guided them out of the harbour, past the rusting hulk of a Soviet trawler that had run aground in the 90s and never been salvaged. It served as both a landmark and a warning. The sea off Chukotka forgave no mistakes. The fishing grounds lay 20 kilometers north, where the continental shelf dropped away and cold currents from the Arctic mixed with the relatively warmer waters of the Pacific. Here, cod and pollock congregated in numbers that made the journey worthwhile, though never quite profitable enough. Dmitry often thought about his son Viktor, who had left for Moscow 12 years ago and now worked in an office, wearing a tie, never smelling of fish. Sometimes Dmitry envied him. Most times, he pitied him. They reached the grounds just after 6 a.m. Alexei prepared the nets while Dmitry cut the engine, letting the boat drift with the current. This was the ancient dance of their profession, reading the water, feeling for the subtle signs that indicated where the fish were schooling. "Here," Dmitry decided. "We drop here." The first 2 nets came up satisfactory, not spectacular, but enough cod to make the fuel costs worthwhile. They worked in comfortable silence, sorting the catch, throwing back undersized fish and the occasional crab. Seabirds wheeled overhead, shrieking their demands for scraps. It was the 3rd net that changed everything. Dmitry felt the resistance immediately as the winch began to pull. "Something heavy," he muttered, more to himself than Alexei. "Very heavy." "Snag?" Alexei asked, moving to help. "Feels like it. But wrong somehow." Dmitry had pulled up nets caught on rocks, on old anchors, on discarded Soviet equipment. This felt different. There was weight, but also a strange give, as if whatever they'd caught was partially buoyant. They worked the winch carefully, neither wanting to lose an expensive net. The hydraulics whined in protest, and Dmitry found himself worrying about those seals Alexei had supposedly greased. 5 minutes of careful work brought the net to the surface. At first, Dmitry thought it was driftwood, a tangle of pale branches caught in the mesh. Then the morning sun broke through the clouds, and he saw it clearly. Bones. A skeleton. But not of any creature he recognized. "Chtiozie kren." Alexei whispered. "What the hell is that?" The skull emerged first, water streaming from empty eye sockets. It was roughly the size of a human skull, but the proportions were wrong. The cranium was elongated, the jaw too pronounced, filled with teeth that were neither quite human nor quite fish. The eye sockets were large and positioned forward, suggesting binocular vision, a predator's eyes. "Careful," Dmitri commanded, his voice tight. "Bring it up slowly. Don't damage it." The rest of the skeleton followed. A ribcage that flared wider than a human's, with more ribs. Dmitri counted 14 pairs where humans had 12. The arms were long, ending in hands with distinctly separate fingers, each tipped with what looked like the remnants of claws. But it was the lower body that made Dmitri's breath catch in his throat. Where legs should have been, there was instead a single structure, a spine that continued downward, articulated and flexible, ending in what must have been a tail. Fragments of what might have been scales or bony plates still clung to some of the vertebrae, catching the light with an opalescent sheen despite their age. "Uncle," Alexei said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This looks like the old stories. The Rybachi Lyodi. The fish people." Dmitri had heard those stories all his life. The indigenous Chuki people had legends of beings that lived in the deepest parts of the Bering Sea, creatures that were neither human nor animal, but something in between. According to the tales, they had been numerous once, living in underwater communities, occasionally trading with coastal villages. They were said to be intelligent, capable of communication, though few humans had ever learned their language. The stories claimed they had vanished centuries ago, driven away by the arrival of Russian colonizers or perhaps by some catastrophe in the depths. Dmitri had always assumed the legends were metaphorical, perhaps distant memories of encounters with seals or sea lions, distorted over generations of retelling. But here, caught in his net, was something that shouldn't exist. "We need to bring it aboard," Dmitri said, his mind already racing through implications. "Carefully. I don't want any bones separated." They worked for nearly an hour, gently extracting the skeleton from the net and laying it out on a top in the Nadezhda's hold. It was remarkably complete, nearly every bone accounted for, though some of the smaller ones in the hands and tail were missing. The skeleton measured approximately 2 meters from skull to tail tip. "What do we do with it?" Alexei asked, staring down at their discovery. "We take it back to Providenia," Dmitri said. "And then we call someone who might know what this is." "The university?" "No." Dmitri pulled out his satellite phone, an expensive luxury, but necessary this far from land. "I know someone at the Marine Research Institute in Vladivostok. We were in the Navy together, back before the Union fell. If anyone can tell us what this is, it's Grigory Petrov." But as Dmitri dialed the number, his hands were shaking slightly. Because deep down, beneath the practical concerns about authorities and scientists and procedures, he felt something else, a profound sense that he had crossed a threshold, that the world had just revealed itself to be stranger and more mysterious than he had ever imagined. The skeleton lay before them, bones gleaming dully in the hold's dim light. And though it had been dead for who knew how long, Dmitri couldn't shake the feeling that those empty eye sockets were watching him, judging him, waiting to see what humanity would do with this impossible discovery. Part 2. The scientists arrive August 16 to 20, 2019. By the time the Nadezhda motored back into Providenia's harbor, word had already begun to spread. In a town of 2,000 people, secrets were impossible to keep. Mikhail Sokolov, who ran the harbor master's office, had seen them offloading something large wrapped in top. His wife worked at the cannery with Dmitri's cousin. By evening, half the town knew that Dmitri Volkov had found something strange in his nets. The rumors grew with each retelling. Some said it was a mermaid. Others claimed it was a monster. Old Yevgeny, who drank too much and claimed to have second sight, swore it was an omen, that the sea was giving up its dead as a warning. Dmitri ignored the speculation and made his phone calls. Grigory Petrov answered on the third ring. They hadn't spoken in almost 5 years, but Grigory's voice was immediately warm. "Dima, my God, how long has it been? How's life on the edge of the world?" "Grigory, I need your help. I found something in my nets. Something impossible." The warmth in Grigory's voice shifted to professional interest. "Impossible how?" "I can't explain over the phone. Can you send me a secure email address? I'll send photographs." 20 minutes later, Dimitri's decades-old laptop was uploading a dozen pictures he'd taken with his phone. The internet connection in Providenia was terrible, a satellite link that cost too much and worked poorly, but eventually the files transmitted. Grigory called back within the hour. Dima, these photographs, they have to be a hoax. Tell me this is a joke. It's not a joke. I pulled it from 20 meters of water, 20 kilometers north of here. This doesn't make sense. The morphology, it's like someone combined a human skeleton with a seal and added fictional elements. Where are you keeping it? In my garage. I didn't know what else to do with it. There was a long pause. Don't let anyone touch it. Don't let anyone take photographs. I'm going to make some calls. This is beyond me. We need a full team. Paleontologists, marine biologists, maybe even anthropologists. Can you keep this quiet for a few days? Dimitri looked out his kitchen window at the crowd gathered across the street, locals trying to peer into his garage. No, he admitted. The whole town knows. Then we move fast. I'll have people there by tomorrow evening. True to his word, Grigory arrived the next day on a charter helicopter from Anada, accompanied by Dr. Svetlana Korolova from the Paleontological Institute in Moscow and Dr. Boris Lebedev, a marine biologist from the Far Eastern Federal University. Dr. Korolova was in her late 40s, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She examined the skeleton for 15 minutes in complete silence while the others waited, then stood up slowly, her face pale. "Gentlemen," she said, "this is either the most elaborate hoax I've ever seen, or it's the most significant biological discovery of the century." "You think it's real?" Grigory asked. "I think we need to transport this to a proper laboratory immediately. I need X-rays, carbon dating, DNA analysis if any organic material has survived. But preliminary examination." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The bone structure appears genuine. The way the joints articulate, the wear patterns, the mineral composition from what I can see. If this is a fake, someone with extraordinary knowledge of comparative anatomy constructed it." Dr. Lebedev crouched beside the skeleton, examining the skull. "These teeth," he said. "They're adapted for a carnivorous diet, but not like any marine mammal I know. See how the molars are flat? That suggests omnivory. And these forelimbs, Dr. Korolova, look at the radius and ulna. The range of motion would have been remarkable." "Like tool-using range of motion?" Grigory asked. "Possibly." Over the next 3 days, Dimitri's garage became an improvised field laboratory. More scientists arrived, an anthropologist from Novosibirsk, a DNA specialist from Petersburg, even a representative from the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow. They brought equipment, lights, cameras, and endless questions. Dimitri found himself interviewed repeatedly, each scientist wanting to hear the exact circumstances of the discovery. Where precisely had he been fishing? What was the water depth? What was the condition of the skeleton when it surfaced? Had he moved any bones? Could he sketch a map of the exact location? The Chuki elders from the indigenous community outside Providenia also came, led by a woman named Ivana Kiak who served as a cultural advisor and translator for the regional government. She was in her 70s, with a face carved by wind and wisdom. She studied the skeleton for a long time, then spoke in Chuki to the other elders. They had an animated discussion in their own language, occasionally gesturing at the bones, before Ivana turned to the assembled scientists. "My grandmother told me stories," she said in accented Russian. Her grandmother told her. "The valrayuak, that's what we call them. The sea people. They lived in the deep places, beyond where humans could dive. Sometimes they came to shore at night, in the old days, before the Russians came. They would trade with our ancestors, strange shells that glowed in the dark, kelp that could heal sickness, once even metal that never rusted. In return, they wanted tools, knives, harpoon points, things made of worked metal." Dr. Korolova listened intently. "Did these stories say what happened to them?" Ivana shrugged. "Different stories say different things. Some say they went away when the Russians brought Christianity, that they feared the new god. Some say they went deeper into the ocean, to places humans couldn't reach. Some say there was a war beneath the waves, and they were destroyed. She looked down at the skeleton. But my grandmother said her grandmother claimed to have met one once. She said they could speak, but not like us. She said they sang, and the singing made pictures in your mind. One of the younger scientists, a PhD student from Moscow, barely suppressed a smile. But Dr. Korolova shot him a warning look. Oral traditions often contain kernels of historical truth, she said. Thank you, Mrs. Kiak. This context is valuable. On the fourth day, they had enough preliminary data to make an initial assessment. The team gathered in the community center, where they'd set up a presentation area. Most of Providenia attended, along with journalists who had somehow gotten wind of the story and made the difficult journey north. Dr. Korolova stood before a projector showing X-rays and photographs. What we can say with confidence is this: the skeleton is genuine. It is not a fake, not a construction. Carbon dating places its age at approximately 800 years, plus or minus 50 years. This means the creature was alive around the year 1200 CE. A murmur ran through the crowd. The skeletal structure is unlike anything in the known fossil record. It shows characteristics of marine mammals, particularly in the skull and torso, but also features we associate with primates, including humans. The hands are particularly striking. They show clear evidence of being adapted for manipulation and tool use. The creature would have been capable of grasping objects, possibly of creating and using tools. She clicked to the next slide, showing a detailed photograph of the tail structure. The lower body is adapted for powerful swimming. Based on the muscle attachment points, we believe this creature was an efficient swimmer, possibly capable of sustained speeds of 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. The tail structure suggests it could dive to considerable depths. What species is it? Someone called out. That's the question we can't answer yet, Dr. Lebedev interjected. It doesn't match any known species, living or extinct. The closest analogues would be pinnips, seals and sea lions, but the differences are too significant. This appears to be something entirely unique. So what are you saying? Asked Mikhail from the harbour master's office. That there's some unknown species living in our waters. We're saying that 800 years ago, such a creature existed, Dr. Korolova said carefully. Whether any still survive. She spread her hands. We have no evidence either way. But Dmitri, watching from the back of the room, saw something in her expression that told him she was hedging. She believed something she wasn't ready to say publicly. After the presentation, as the crowd dispersed, Dmitri approached Dr. Korolova. You think there might be more of them, don't you? She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Off the record, yes. 800 years is nothing in evolutionary terms. And if this creature lived in the deep ocean, as seems likely, then we would have very little chance of detecting a population. We've barely explored the ocean depths, Mr. Volkov. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the bottom of our own seas. The Chuki stories suggest they were intelligent. I know, and that's what troubles me most. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Those hand bones, I didn't mention this in the presentation, but there are wear patterns on them. Specific types of wear that suggest repetitive fine motor activities. Activities like creating things. And the skull capacity suggests a brain size comparable to early hominids. If these creatures existed, if they were intelligent, and if they're still out there, then we're not alone, Dmitri finished. Then we never were alone, Dr. Korolova corrected. We just didn't know it. Part 3. The investigation deepens August 21 to 30, 2019. The skeleton was transported to Moscow in a refrigerated container aboard a military cargo plane. The Academy of Sciences had friends in high places. But the questions it raised remained in Providenia, multiplying like storm clouds. Dmitri found himself unable to return to normal fishing. His nets sat on the dock, his boat remained moored. Instead, he spent hours each day with Alexei and a team of graduate students who had stayed behind, tasked with conducting a systematic search of the waters where the skeleton had been found. They used sonar, dragged the bottom with specialized nets, even convinced the local garrison to loan them some remote-operated diving equipment left over from Soviet submarine recovery operations. The equipment was 30 years old and barely functional, but the students managed to get it working. What they found on the seafloor surprised no one more than Dmitry himself. 23 meters down, in a small canyon carved by ancient currents, the sonar revealed anomalies. Structures that didn't match the surrounding geology. The ROV's cameras, grainy and distorted by the murky water, showed what appeared to be deliberately placed stones, not quite walls, but not random either. Something in between, as if someone had been building but hadn't finished, or as if the structures had been eroded by centuries of current. "Look at this," Katerina, one of the graduate students, called out, pointing at her laptop screen. "There, that arrangement. Those stones are too regular to be natural." Dmitry squinted at the image. 3 large stones formed a rough triangle, with smaller rocks filling the spaces between. In the center was something else, something the grainy camera couldn't quite resolve. "Can we bring it up?" he asked. "Too deep for divers, and the ROV's manipulator arm is broken. But we can get better images if we move the boat." They spent the rest of the day mapping the area. What emerged was a picture of something that might have been a dwelling, or a shrine, or perhaps something humans had no word for. The structure covered about 20 square meters, situated in a protected area where the current was minimal. And scattered among the stones were more bones. Not full skeletons this time, but fragments, a femur here, vertebrae there, the broken pieces of a skull. At least 3 individuals, Katerina estimated, possibly more. But mixed in with the bones were other objects that made Dmitry's heart race. Tools. Or what looked like tools. Stone blades that had been worked and shaped. What might have been a harpoon point carved from bone. Something that resembled a scraper or perhaps a knife handle. All of it encrusted with barnacles and sediment, but the shapes were too deliberate to be natural. "They made things," Alexei breathed, staring at the screen. "They actually made things." "We need to tell Dr. Koroleva," Katerina said, already reaching for the satellite phone. But Dmitry held up a hand. "Wait. Before we do that, I want to talk to Ivana Kiyak again." They found the Chuki elder at her home, a small house on the outskirts of Providenia where traditional and modern life existed in uncomfortable coexistence. A satellite dish on the roof, but seal skins drying on racks in the yard. Ivana listened to their report, studied their photographs, then invited them inside for tea. Her living room was crowded with 3 generations of family. Children doing homework, adults watching television, a grandmother in the corner working on an intricate beadwork design. "I need to show you something," Ivana said, disappearing into a back room. She returned carrying a wooden box, clearly very old, the wood dark with age and handling. "This belonged to my great-great-grandmother. I was going to give it to the scientists, but then they took the skeleton away so quickly, I didn't have the chance." She opened the box carefully. Inside, nestled in faded cloth, was a necklace made of shells. But these weren't ordinary shells. They had been worked, drilled with precise holes, and arranged in a deliberate pattern. And they glowed. Even in the bright light of the living room, the shells gave off a faint bioluminescent shimmer, green and blue, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. "My ancestor said a valrayuak gave this to her great-grandmother," Ivana explained. "It was payment for a set of metal needles. The story says the sea person came onto the shore at night, placed the necklace on a rock, and took the needles. They never spoke, but my ancestor said she understood that it was a fair trade." "May I?" Dmitry asked, reaching toward the necklace. Ivana nodded. Dmitry lifted it carefully. The shells were warm to the touch, and up close, he could see that each one had been carved with incredibly fine geometric patterns, far more precise than any work he'd ever seen from native craftspeople, or from modern artisans, for that matter. "There's more," Ivana said. She reached into the box again and withdrew something wrapped in leather. Unwrapping it revealed a blade, about 15 centimeters long, made from a material that wasn't quite stone and wasn't quite metal. It was dark green, with a slight translucence, and sharp enough that Dmitry could see his breath fogging on its edge. "What is this made of?" Katerina asked, awe in her voice. "No one knows," Ivana replied. My family has kept it for 8 generations. We've never shown it to outsiders because we feared it would be taken to a museum, locked away. But now I think it's time the world knew the truth. The truth being? Dmitri prompted gently. Ivana looked at each of them in turn. That my people have always known we weren't the only intelligent beings in this part of the world. That the sea has its own peoples, its own nations, its own history. And that when the Russians came with their ships and guns and churches, the valrayuak chose to hide rather than fight. They went deep, deeper than humans could follow. But they didn't disappear. They've always been there, watching, waiting. Waiting for what? Alexei asked. I don't know, Ivana admitted. My grandmother used to say they were waiting for humans to become wise. To learn to share the ocean instead of trying to own it. She smiled sadly. I think they might be waiting a very long time. The next morning, Dmitri made a decision. He called Dr. Koroleva in Moscow. We've found a settlement site, he told her. And Ivana Kiak has artifacts that prove contact between the valrayuak and humans occurred as recently as 150 years ago. You need to come back. All of you need to come back. There was a long pause on the line. Mr. Volkov, what you're suggesting, if this is true, it changes everything we know about marine biology, anthropology, human history. We'll need international cooperation. The funding alone. Doctor, Dmitri interrupted. I don't care about funding or politics or academic careers. I care about the truth. These creatures existed. They might still exist. And if they do, don't we have an obligation to know? To understand? Another pause. Then, you're right. Of course you're right. I'll start making calls. Give me a week to organize a proper expedition. But as it turned out, they didn't have a week. 3 days later, Alexei was out checking the navigation buoys north of the harbor. Routine maintenance that the harbor authority paid locals to perform. He was alone in a small outboard boat, just after sunset, when he saw something break the surface 50 meters away. At first, he thought it was a seal. But seals didn't move like that. This was too deliberate, too purposeful. And it was larger than any seal he'd ever seen. Alexei cut the engine and drifted, watching. The figure surfaced again, closer this time. In the failing light, Alexei could make out a head, shoulders, the curve of a powerful body moving through the water with liquid grace. Not a seal. Not anything he'd ever seen before. It surfaced a third time, even closer. And this time, it looked directly at him. Alexei would later struggle to describe the eyes. Large, dark, intelligent. Not the blank stare of a fish or the simple awareness of a seal, but something more. Something that looked back at him with recognition, with understanding, with judgment. They regarded each other for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds. Then, with a movement almost too quick to follow, the creature dove. Alexei caught a glimpse of a powerful tail, neither fish nor mammal but something in between, before it disappeared into the dark water. He started the engine with shaking hands and raced back to shore. By the time he reached Dmitri's house, he could barely speak coherently. I saw one, he gasped. Uncle, I saw one. It was real. It was alive. It looked at me. Dmitri believed him instantly. How could he not? The skeleton had been real. The settlement site was real. The artifacts were real. Why wouldn't the creatures themselves still exist? Did anyone else see it? Dmitri asked. No, I was alone. Who's going to believe me? I believe you, Dmitri said. And I think Dr. Koroleva will too. But he also thought something else, something he didn't say aloud. If the valrayuak were revealing themselves now, after centuries of hiding, it meant something had changed. Either they had decided humans were ready for contact, or they had decided that hiding was no longer possible. Either way, the world was about to become a much stranger place. Part 4. Revelation September 1-15, 2019. Dr. Koroleva returned to Providenia with a team that had grown from 3 scientists to 20, along with support staff, journalists from major Russian news outlets, and, most surprisingly, 2 representatives from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. The Russian government was taking an interest. They established a proper base camp on the shore near where the skeleton had been discovered, complete with laboratory equipment, diving gear, and enough technology to make Dmitry feel like his small corner of the world had suddenly been thrust into the future. The work proceeded systematically. Professional divers examined the settlement site, carefully excavating and photographing everything. More bones were recovered, enough to establish that at least 7 individuals had lived or died at the site. The artifacts Ivana had shared were subjected to analysis that revealed them to be made from materials not found anywhere on land, minerals and alloys that existed only in deep ocean thermal vents. This proves a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, one of the materials scientists explained at the daily briefings. They were mining the seafloor, extracting minerals, and working them into tools. The technical sophistication is remarkable. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the acoustic specialists, a young woman named Doria who worked for the Institute of Oceanology, had been recording underwater sounds as part of the expedition's protocol. Most of it was background noise, the groan of shifting ice, the creak of the boat's hull, the chatter of marine life. But on September 7th, her hydrophones picked up something else. "Listen to this," she said, gathering the team around her equipment. She played a recording from the previous night. At first, Dmitry heard only the familiar sounds of the ocean. But then, underneath, there was something else, a series of complex vocalizations, neither whale song nor any other marine mammal call. The sounds were structured, patterned, almost like language. "I've run this through every database of marine animal sounds we have," Doria explained. "It doesn't match anything. And look at the spectrogram." She displayed the visual representation of the sounds. The patterns were extraordinarily complex, with harmonic structures and frequency modulations that suggested intentional communication. "There's more," she continued. "I've been recording every night since we arrived. This is the 3rd night in a row these vocalizations have appeared. And each night, they're coming from a slightly different location, but always within 5 kilometers of our camp. It's as if they're watching us," Dr. Korolova finished. The implications hung in the air like smoke. "We need to try to communicate," said Dr. Viktor Solovyov, a linguist from Moscow State University who had joined the team specifically to analyze any evidence of language. "If these are linguistic signals, we might be able to establish basic communication protocols." Over the next 3 days, they tried everything. They played recorded vocalizations back into the water. They used underwater speakers to broadcast simple mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions. They even tried musical patterns, on the theory that mathematics and music might be universal languages. Nothing. The mysterious sounds continued to appear on the recordings each night, but there was no response to any of their attempts at communication. Until Ivana Kiak made a suggestion. "You're trying to speak their language," she told the assembled scientists. "But my grandmother said the valrayuak didn't speak with words. She said they sang pictures. Maybe your recordings are missing the point." "What do you mean?" Dr. Solovyov asked. "The songs weren't just sounds. They had, I don't know the scientific word. They made you see things in your mind. Feel things. Maybe your machines can hear them, but they can't understand them." It was a graduate student, one of the younger team members who was more open to unconventional ideas, who made the breakthrough. "What if it's not about acoustic analysis? What if there's some other component we're missing? Electromagnetic fields, maybe? Or some form of sonar imaging that works on a neurological level?" They expanded the sensor array, adding equipment to detect electromagnetic signatures and low-frequency vibrations. And that night, when the vocalizations appeared again, they discovered something extraordinary. The sounds were accompanied by complex patterns of low-frequency electromagnetic pulses, frequencies that, according to medical literature, could influence human neural activity. The creatures weren't just making sounds. They were creating a multimodal signal that could potentially bypass language entirely and communicate directly with the brain. "This is..." Dr. Korolova struggled for words. "This is communication on a completely different level than human language. They're not encoding concepts into words. They're somehow transmitting the concepts directly. Can we decode it? Someone asked. I don't know if decode is the right word. It's not code. It's more like telepathy, but grounded in physics rather than mysticism. The revelation sparked intense debate. Some scientists were skeptical, suggesting the electromagnetic signals were coincidental. Others pointed out that certain fish and marine mammals did produce weak electromagnetic fields for navigation and communication. Perhaps the valrayuak had simply evolved more sophisticated versions of the same ability. But the most important question remained unanswered. What were they trying to say? Dr. Solovyov proposed an experiment. If these signals can interact with human neural activity, then maybe the only way to understand them is to experience them directly. We need a human subject to listen to the signals under controlled conditions and report what they perceive. Several team members volunteered immediately. After much discussion, they chose Dmitry. You found the first skeleton, Dr. Korolova explained. In a sense, you initiated this entire process. And your nephew claims to have seen one of them. There might be something about your family, your connection to this place, that makes you the right choice. The experiment was set up in a small boat anchored over the settlement site. Dmitry sat in the stern, wearing headphones connected to the hydrophones. The electromagnetic sensors were positioned around him, and several team members monitored his vital signs while others watched through binoculars from the support vessel 50 meters away. Night fell. The temperature dropped. Dmitry waited, feeling foolish and frightened in equal measure. The sounds began around 11 p.m. Through the headphones, Dmitry heard the complex vocalizations they'd been recording. But this time, listening directly with the hydrophone submerged near where the signals were strongest, something different happened. Images began to form in his mind. Not quite images, more like impressions, feelings given form. He saw dark water lit by bioluminescent creatures. He felt the pressure of depth, the cold embrace of the abyss. He understood, without words, concepts that had no human names, ideas about community, about the ocean as a vast interconnected web, about time that flowed differently in the depths where light never reached. And then he saw them. The valrayuak. Not as skeletons, but as living beings. Dozens of them, moving through the water with grace that made dolphins look clumsy. Their bodies were sleek and powerful, built for the crushing pressures of the deep. Their faces, he couldn't call them anything else, were intelligent, expressive, almost sorrowful. And they were watching him. The vision intensified. He understood that they had always been here, retreating deeper with each generation as human ships became more numerous, as sonar became more powerful, as the surface world grew louder and more intrusive. They had survived by becoming phantoms, by living in places humans couldn't reach, by being so careful that they left almost no trace. But now they faced a choice. The ocean was changing. Warming waters were pushing them from their traditional depths. Human fishing was depleting their food sources. Underwater noise was making their sophisticated communication nearly impossible in some areas. They could retreat no further. And so they had made a decision. One of their elders, ancient beyond human reckoning, had volunteered to die in shallow waters where human nets might find him. A deliberate sacrifice, a message sent across the species barrier. We are here. We have always been here. And we need you to know. Dmitry gasped, tears streaming down his face. The images were fading, but the emotional weight remained. He understood that what he'd experienced wasn't just communication. It was a plea, a hope, a desperate gamble that humans might prove worthy of sharing the ocean. The sound stopped. The electromagnetic pulses ceased. Dmitry removed the headphones with shaking hands. Uncle. Alexei called from the support boat. Are you all right? Dmitry couldn't answer immediately. He sat in the darkness, staring at the black water, processing what he'd experienced. Finally, he picked up the radio. Dr. Korolova, he said, his voice hoarse. I understand now. I know what they want. 6 months later, on March 2020, Moscow. The press conference at the Russian Academy of Sciences drew international attention. Dr. Svetlana Korolova stood before a packed auditorium, flanked by scientists from a dozen disciplines, representatives from 3 governments, and, most surprisingly, Ivana Kiak, who had been flown to Moscow specifically for the occasion. The skeleton, now officially designated Homo aquaticus pending further taxonomic review, was displayed behind protective glass. But the real revelation came from the recordings, the artifacts, and Dmitri's testimony. "We stand at a threshold," Dr. Koroleva announced. "For the first time in human history, we have evidence, compelling, reproducible evidence, of another intelligent species sharing our planet. Not from space, not from our distant past, but here, now, in the oceans we thought we knew." The questions came rapid fire. Were there more of them? How many? Where? Could they be communicated with? Were they dangerous? Dr. Koroleva answered patiently, honestly. "We don't know how many individuals remain. Our best estimates suggest a small population, perhaps a few thousand, scattered across the Pacific's deepest trenches. Communication is possible but requires technology we're only beginning to understand. As for danger, they've been sharing the ocean with us for all of human history. If they meant us harm, we would know." But it was Ivana who gave the most important answer, speaking in her careful Russian to the assembled crowd. "My people have a saying, the ocean does not belong to us. We belong to the ocean. For too long, the surface world has forgotten this. We have treated the sea as if it were empty, as if we were the only ones with a claim to it. Now we know the truth. Now we must decide what kind of neighbors we want to be." In Providenia, Dmitri watched the press conference on his old television, Katya beside him, Alexei and his young wife visiting for dinner. The Nadezhda was moored at the dock, ready for tomorrow's fishing. Life had returned to something like normal, though Dmitri knew nothing would ever truly be the same. His phone rang. It was Dr. Koroleva. "Mr. Volkov, I wanted to thank you personally, before the media circus makes that impossible. What you discovered, what you helped us understand, it's changed the world." "Have there been any more sightings?" Dmitri asked. "Sonar contacts, mostly. A few more acoustic recordings. Nothing conclusive, but..." She paused. "We've established a protected marine zone around your discovery site. No fishing, no shipping, no seismic testing. The UN is considering a proposal for an international deep ocean sanctuary. It's a start. Will it be enough? I don't know. But it's more than we were doing before. And sometimes, that's all we can ask for, to do better than we did yesterday." After the call ended, Dmitri walked down to the harbor. The night was clear, stars sharp in the Arctic sky. The water was calm, black as ink, holding its secrets. He thought about the skeleton they'd found, about the elder who had chosen to sacrifice himself so that humans might finally see. He thought about the settlement site, now protected, where perhaps new generations might one day return. He thought about Alexei's encounter, about the eyes that had looked back with recognition and judgment. And he wondered what the valrayuak were thinking now, in their deep sanctuaries, as they listened to the sounds of the surface world beginning, slowly, hesitantly, to change. Somewhere in the darkness, a seal barked. Or perhaps it was something else, something older and stranger, speaking in a voice humans were only beginning to understand. Dmitri smiled and turned back toward home, toward warmth and family and the ordinary miracles of daily life. But he knew he would return to these waters tomorrow, and every day after. Not just to fish, but to listen, to watch, to remember that the world was larger and more wondrous than any single species could comprehend. And in the depths below, where pressure crushed and cold bit deep, the valrayuak swam their ancient paths, waiting to see if humanity would prove itself worthy of the gift they had given, the knowledge that we were never alone. The ocean kept its secret still. But now, at least, it had shared one. And that changed everything. If you liked The Fisherman's Story, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and share this story with your friends.